Hello, Internet, and welcome to episode number 214 of the Comic Watchers Show. I'm Matt, he's Chad, and hanging out with us this week is letterer and cartoonist extraordinaire Chris Eliopoulos, who just educated me on how to properly pronounce his last name so I don't sound like an ass.
I know. It's a name. It's a name. Look, what can I tell you?
What can we do? We can only be who we are.
We're stuck with it.
Stuck with it. So, well, Chris, thank you for hanging out with us tonight.
Pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you and Chad have been talking for a little while. It's probably Chad's fault that it didn't happen sooner.
It is. It's always my fault.
You just have so many good guests that you had to wait for me.
So,
I just have so much going on that's.
Yes, life waits for no man. Well, Chris, let's just get this ball rolling. So you are, for those who don't know, quite the prolific letterer and cartoonist, and you work with Brad Meltzer on very cool books that teach kids about historical figures and
And the cartoon or the PBS cartoon.
And the PBS cartoon, and used to do Desperate Times that were in its own comic book and in the back of Savage Dragon for a period of time. But don't let me write your biography. Tell us a little bit about your history, who you are, how you got into the business, etc.
Okay, so you want the whole life story, huh?
The whole life story. When a man and a woman love each other.
Yeah, no, I think it really started when I was pretty young. My father used to take my sister and I to a little local candy shop every Sunday. We were allowed to pick out one item. My sister would get a candy bar, which would be consumed before we even left the building. And I got a comic book because I figured it could have it for a longer time, like I was being pragmatic. And those early ones were like very early Justice League, Flash, Green Lantern, Batman, Superman, which I still have behind me. I don't know, it's hard to see with this thing, but my comic rack, I still have those comics. And so I sort of fell in love with that stuff for a while. I would read those comics. And then my uncle owned a company. It was like a remainder book company. They would buy like leftover of a print run for a book, and then they'd get it for cheap, and then he would sell it to like schools and libraries and people and stuff like that. And on the weekends, my parents would help him at his warehouse. And in the warehouse, they had these big giant metal bins, and they would bring me to the warehouse, and they would dump me into this little bin, which was just filled with books. And I found these little Fawcett Peanuts books. Like they're just literally just like a pocket book, they're called. And I fell in love with Peanuts, and that was where it went for me. So I literally dropped comics, went only to comic strips. I love Peanuts. And then as I got older, I found out about like Pogo and, BC and Wizard of Id and Beetle Bailey and all the other ones that you see, in those days. And then in high school, I met a friend who was very into comic books. And I went over to his house one day, and he introduced me to John Byrne X-Men. And it ignited a whole new thing in me. I was like, whoa, this is like great stuff. I love this stuff. And so we bonded over comics. We would go to the store every week. We'd pick up our comics. We would sit and draw together. And then I went off to college, and we sort of lost touch. But I sort of fell out of comics again. Until my senior year, I was taking a minor in illustration, and I took a course with Gene Colan. Yeah. And so it was great. He told me I would never make it in mainstream comics, and I would never get published at Marvel or DC. So I would bust his chops every time I saw him afterward. But he took us on a field trip up to Marvel. And so I got to go see the doings at Marvel, and just at a time when I needed to get an internship for my final semester. So I put in an application for an internship, and I came back in. I brought in my portfolio, and it was all graphic design stuff, which was my major. And they were like, "Oh, you know typography. We're going to make you a letterer." And I had no clue what that was. But so they originally brought me on in productions. I would do paste up and all that kind of stuff. But at lunchtime, I would get all the supplies for lettering and I would practice lettering. And eventually someone left the lettering department and they moved me in. And so I worked at Marvel for just about 2 years, a little over 2 years, I think. And then I went freelance because I had gotten enough lettering work freelance that I was making more money at night than I was during the day at Marvel. So I left and went freelance. I've been freelance with Marvel pretty much ever since. So that's the lettering side.
That's the lettering side.
Yeah.
Well, didn't you also do the Savage Dragon, like hand letter those, like 100 some issues or something?
Yeah, I started hand lettering. That's because that's what was done at the time. It was all I used a Hunt 107 shaved down. I would letter on the boards. For the first 106 Savage Dragons, I lettered on the boards for him, and then it just all went digital. Everything was digital. It became a cost-cutting measure. It was good for when you needed to make massive corrections. It was easy, or if you needed 4 people to letter a book in an hour, you could do it because you could just have one font and all looks alike. When you were hand lettering it, 4 different people letter it, it looks like garbage because it's 4 different people.
Right.
So I lettered for a number of years and then got into the computer end of things. But Savage Dragon was my last fully hand lettered comic that I ever did.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I know that the industry, pretty much industry wide, has gone digital to lettering. What are the pros and cons of either for you? I mean, you mentioned if massive corrections need to be done, that you can do it, and that's cool. But what are some of the other advantages or drawbacks?
So for hand lettering, it's an art form. It's a form of calligraphy. It looks more organic and works so much better with hand-drawn art. I've always felt like they blend together so much better. But in these days, the thing with digital is, again, like I said, you create a font and you can give 20 people each a page with the font, and you could have that book lettered in 20 minutes if you needed to, right? So there's consistency in style. And then what happens too, so back in the old days when we hand lettered, if something needed to be corrected, the people in the office, the letterers in the office would have to go in, white stuff out, re-letter it. So a lot of the script changes were made before it was lettered. Digital now, you have the ability to swap out anything. So the sad part about it, I mean, it was a good process because you could fix things and nobody could tell that anything needed to be fixed. It's gone so far off the deep end, though, that writers are turning in scripts that aren't done, or they rewrite them after they're lettered, or there's massive changes. Oh, yeah. I mean, the comics you see today are, for the most part, 5th or 6th rewrites in lettering form.
Interesting.
It goes through so many hands, and people want to make changes. And so many writers have grown now. The new guys and gals have come up not knowing that we used to have to make sure the script was locked before it went to the letter. Now it's sort of like, we'll figure it out as we go.
Right.
And so, I've had a writer who would send you one half of the script. You would letter it. He would get it back, write the second half, and then rewrite the first half. And then you turn it back in, and then he'd rewrite the second half of it. You'd send that back in, and then he'd rewrite the whole thing.
Oh, no.
So, it just was an ongoing process. So
I hope it's not Bendis, because he's wordy.
Brian is wordy, but Brian is good. Like, Brian, besides being a really good guy,
sure,
he is a professional. He will give you a finalized script, maybe 1 or 2 little items, spelling errors, because God knows Brian can't spell to save his life. Or, punctuation stuff that comes through proofreading. But Brian is right there. Usually, if you look at the top professionals, most of them are on it and they know to turn in a finalized script. Yeah. But there are a lot of people now who use the crutch of computer lettering to realize, oh, that didn't work. I got to rewrite this whole thing. So Unfortunately for the letterers these days, they're redoing books 4 and 5 times for the price of one. So,
I mean, you do see guys like Hassan Otsmane-Elhaou, or I probably just butchered his name too, or Aditya Bidikar that are doing some really fascinating stuff.
Yeah,
with the form.
Yeah. You know, what's for the mainstream books like the Marvel and DC, they really want a standardized look. And for the most part, don't want to deviate or try something too outrageous. Sometimes we do it. Sometimes a writer will ask, or an artist, or sometimes like that. You know, I've done things in the past where we tried something new or different. But they try to keep a consistent look. And if you want to say, it's almost like so for the Marvel team, like I have 6 people who work for me. We do most of the Marvel books, and then there's a uniformity to the look of the Marvel line, which they like. They want to sort of have a thing where you open up a book, you know it's a Marvel book by the look of it. But if you're doing independent books, there's more of an ability to try something new or try something that hasn't been done before. I had hoped at some point that since we are using computers, that you get more graphic designy with it, that there's something else you could do, but other than imitate what was done before with hand lettering. And you see it sometimes, but we've sort of gotten to the point where it's expected the comics have to have this hand lettered look, even though it's computer fonts. So yeah, there's definitely room to try new things and mix it up. But I think a lot of people are so accustomed to the look of it. For the most part, we sort of keep into a certain look. So,
well, it's kind of like when a little over 20 years now, which I can't believe I'm saying that, almost a quarter century ago, actually. But when Marvel first launched the Ultimate line, and all their letters for all those books were always the lowercase font.
Yes.
And it, like you were saying, it brought a uniformity to it, which is cool in its own way. Yeah. But it also is immediately obvious that it's computer generated. And I think we've come along. I hope you'll agree we've come a long way since then, in at least ways of making it look more organic.
Yeah, I mean, well, what's funny is, so the story behind that one is they had been trying to go in-house with the lettering. So they had like a few guys in-house, and they asked me to kind of teach them a little bit and train them. And to do that, they basically did a contract with me where I got a certain amount of books. And the first thing they did was they handed me the Ultimates and said, we need this in a week. And by the way, and then Bill Gemma said, I want it all upper and lowercase. So I had to go out in a week. I had to create an upper and lowercase font. I had to letter the Ultimates. I had to design the recap page, the title page, all within a week. But what happened was, I had created these fonts that I tried to make them a little bit more organic, and they didn't look like, the uppercase R wasn't the same as the lowercase R. And just to sort of give it a little more of an organic feel. And as we've gone on, editors have preferred a more unified look to it, and they want it less organic looking and then more. And it's funny because they will get remarks like, it looks too different. You got to make it look, the same. And you're just like, we've changed, like the expectations are different. But yeah, and the hardest part with the upper and lower was just, there was a reason we did all uppercase for 100 years in comics, which was the printing, safe, space saver. Like an upper and lower, you need to leave room in between lines so that the ascenders and descenders don't hit each other on different, lettering lines. So that was a big thing. So then the upper and lowercase, there's more space between the lines of type. It takes up more space. So I tried to create a font where it wasn't as wide, and it was a learning process to figure that one out. And the minute Gemmis left, they're like, "We're all going to uppercase. Let's go back." But then some people liked it. Some people like it because it looks literary, sort of like a regular a novel that
right,
upper and lowercase. So it's just a preference. I prefer, I'm old, so I prefer the old school, all uppercase, and but if somebody wants something upper and lowercase, we do it. It's fun.
Yeah, jump in, man.
So, what was kind of what made you want to move from that side of the you know co- that side of the production to the more creative side with
Well, I'd always wanted to be a cartoonist. Like I'd grown up wanting to be Schultz. I wanted to do a comic strip. I'd always been drawing stuff. When I was on staff at Marvel, I would do a few things. Like I wrote the Marvel Age calendar, which was like, everybody's birthday and then little jokes that we would do. And I would do like little drawings for What the magazine, or I'd maybe do a drawing in a letter column, whatever it may have been. But the lettering thing took off, and like it was one of those things where you go, "Oh my God, I'm making so much money. I got to keep doing this." And there was a point where I was hand lettering like 30 books a month. So there was no time to do anything else. Like I was literally doing a book a day. And then Eric Larson and I became really good friends from working on the books together. And we would be on the phone every day, like for hours, to the point where our wives were like, enough. The phone bills are costing more than what you make on these books. You got to stop. But we would chat, and I would mention the fact that I wanted to get back into cartooning, that I was kind of like annoyed that I went for the money and not for the career. And he goes, well, if you want, you can have 2 pages a month in Savage Dragon. I said, really? He goes, do whatever you want to do. I don't care. I've always liked the old comics where they would have the main story and then other comics and like even full out prose stories, whatever it was. I want to mix it up in Dragon. And I said, great. And he goes, oh, by the way, the first one's due tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I basically, Desperate Times was just basically a, oh God, what do I do? And I just basically drew me and my friend from college. So I started doing that and more. I would do that every month. And then another friend, Judd Winnick, was doing, have you ever heard of like the Complete Idiot's Guides books?
Yes.
Yes.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah. So he was doing those, and then he was done. He didn't want to do them anymore. So he recommended me to them. And then for a period of like a couple of years, I was doing like, I can't even tell you how many of those books I did. Probably 300 to 400 books. I did, maybe 5 or 6 cartoons per book. And then, I was still trying to draw. I was trying to get a comic strip into newspapers. At one point, United got interested in Desperate Times. I kind of converted into a comic strip. I sent them samples. I worked with them. I literally got to the point where Amy Lago, who was the editor for Peanuts for Schultz's last editor,
oh wow,
was like calling me up, and she said, all right, get ready. You're going to need a lawyer because we're going to be sending you a contract. We're going to get moving with this. And I was like, wow, I made it. I'm going to be a syndicated cartoonist. And the next day she sent me a note and said, the head sales guy said, it's a bachelor strip. We already have one. We're not going to be able to sell it. I'm sorry.
Oh.
And I was like, oh man. But she's like, but I love your work so much. I'm sending it to my old boss, who's now the head of the LA Times syndicate. So, and I worked with her for a while, and she had all these rules. It was like less words and, less panels and, and she kind of tamed down your material. And it got to the point where the both of us looked at it and said, this is not at all interesting anymore. So we dropped it. And then I was up at Marvel. I was coming up with this idea I had in my head. I was writing it down. And I was in CB Cebulski's office, and they were trying to come up with a new line of books for kids called Marvel Age. And he was telling me about it. He's like, oh, we're going to do like a power pack, and we're going to do something else. And I said, oh man, you should do this book I have. It's an idea about Franklin Richards. And, he's like this kid who gets in trouble with all his dad's stuff. And literally in the middle of me telling him the idea, he gets on the phone, and I'm like, geez, I bored this guy to death. Like, he doesn't even want to hear the story. But he's on the phone with David Gabriel, sales VP, saying we've got another book for the line. So he was like, all right, I'm going to assign you to an editor, and you're going to start doing a book. And then they had us run in the back of Power Pack first, and then went off onto his own. So I was doing this book called Franklin Richard, Son of a Genius for a while.
I remember that. I loved it.
Yeah, so we did that for a number of years. Then I wrote Lockjaw and the Pet Avengers for a number of years. And then I went off and I did a book with my former editor called Cowboy. And we put it out, and then DreamWorks optioned it for a TV show or a movie, and that just kind of languished for like 6 years. But in the meantime, Brad Meltzer had seen my work and called me up and just said, "Hey, you want to do some books?" And so I said, "Sure." And then we started doing these children's books.
And here we are today.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hey. So
the style, the way you do those characters, it's so unique. When you're trying to, do a character, how do you try to capture, that iconic character in that, I don't know, maybe the childlike form you do?
Yeah. So the thing about the books is we do these historical biographies of these famous people, but like as kids. So all throughout the books, they always remain as children. It's sort of like, the way I put it, it's almost like an avatar you would see on, a social media thing, right? This is the avatar. It's not how they actually look, but we want the kids to know that they were just like you, like they were a kid just like you. But so what I would do is I basically would go online, just Google up the person and type in like iconic, George Washington, iconic Abraham Lincoln, iconic Amelia Earhart, and you get the look. And then I would sort of just, even mustaches and beards, like, the first time I did Albert Einstein, I gave him a big giant mustache. Everybody was like, "What? Like an 11-year-old kid with a mustache?" The kids love it because it's bizarre seeing this 11-year-old with a mustache. So really just all I do is sort of figure out what the most iconic look is, and then I kind of show it off to my publisher and Brad. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I have to go back and kind of tweak it a little bit. Like we did George Washington, and I think I did like something like 25 different hairstyles or versions of his hair to get it to look right. But most of the time I nail it on the first one and we go. So simple stuff.
And is that how the PBS series kind of, from those books, that's how that evolved into that? Or
yeah, Brad had been talking to the VP of PBS Kids and about converting this into a TV show. And so she basically asked us to go off and write a pitch and put a pitch together. So he would write it up. I would draw up, a bunch of images. We would give it to her. She would say, "Oh, that doesn't work. This works. Try this, do this." And we went through, I don't know, like 6 or 7 different pitches to the point where we got close enough where she said, "All right, we're going to greenlight you to do a pilot." So what that means is we're going to give you, I forget the amount, X amount of dollars, go off and find an animation company, put together the story, put together, everything. She said, "The only thing I'm going to tell you what I want out of this, the only thing that I'm requiring is it has to look like Chris's artwork. That's it." So Brad and I were both executive producers. We're also consultants. And so he works with the writers on the scripts, and I work with the animators. I design all the characters. I work with the animators to make sure it works right. So we're like hands-on. But yeah, so it was that's why. Plus, we wanted to make sure that if they watch the show and they like it, they see the characters, and then they go to the bookstore and they see somebody that looks exactly like them. We're like, "Oh, we got them!" Like, here's the same thing. So, although the adults always go, "Your books sort of look like that TV show."
Yeah.
Gee, thanks.
Well, I think because we started, my son is he's 7 now, but during the lockdown, he started watching Xavier Riddle, and I was like, that name is familiar. Like,
we had to comic references get thrown in everywhere. So, because it's funny, because at first everybody was calling him Xavier, and we're like, no, Xavier, like Charles Xavier. You have to You have to get it right. But yeah, you'll see in the books, even in the TV show, there are a lot of Easter eggs. Like if you look, there's always some like comic book references or Star Wars or Raiders or
And Brad's a
anything.
character.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's got the ego. He had to have a character of himself as one of the main characters. But we appear in every episode. So he appears also there's a picture that they go through to the secret museum, and it's Brad. In the opening credits, there's a picture of me that goes by. So we sneak ourselves. We have very large egos. We have to put ourselves everywhere. So
will we see your riddle and the Da Vinci Code?
Well, we just did. We've done Da Vinci. We just did Michelangelo. So who knows? Maybe we'll have to have him search for the Holy Grail.
That's all you can do at this point, right? Nowhere to go but up.
Yep.
So this might be one of those questions that's hard to answer in so many words that unless you're an artist, you understand, or a fellow artist like yourself.
Right.
But when you're coming up with a cartoon, idealized version of somebody famous, like how do you hone in on what makes that person look unique and can translate into an identifiable cartoon version of them?
Yeah.
And I use Barack Obama as an example because, okay, his face is thin, it's a little long, he's got high cheekbones. Well, that describes a lot of people.
Right.
But if you could try to put that into words for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's a form of caricature, but it's not like I'm not very good at caricatures. Because they try to accentuate like parts of the face and make them like a little grotesque. I try to make them look as good as they can when I'm doing it. But obviously like you do Barack Obama, you've got, the hairline, you've got the large ears. He happens to have like one mole. So if you do that mole, sometimes something as simple as a mole will like hit where somebody goes, I know who that is.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes it's just one identifiable thing about them. Like, Albert Einstein, it's so simple. He's got the big crazy hair, big mustache, boom, you're there.
Right.
Some of them are hard. Like we did for the TV show. We had to do Carol Burnett, but she's not there's not a lot of stuff there that you could grab onto and say, oh my God, this makes her iconic. So we sort of went with the hairstyle and so yeah, sometimes it is difficult to figure out we did like Muhammad Ali or Jesse Owens. Like there's not a lot of very distinguishing parts of their faces that would stand out. Or, who else have we done recently? God, you name it, we've done them. But like anything, who are we doing now? Who am I gonna we're doing Stephen Hawking, right? For the next one. I mean, other than being in a wheelchair, there's not a very identifiable look to his face, and so you sort of find some characteristics about him, like he had this sort of hair part and stuff like that. So you sort of just grab onto something that gets you close enough that somebody goes, "Oh, okay, I can tell who that is." But,
is your wife sort of your test audience for whether or not you've succeeded or failed?
Oh, well, I mean, she definitely takes a look and tells me if it's cute or not. But Brad is the ultimate voice. Like, like I said, Brad and I are we're very hands-on with everything. On the TV show, they laugh at us because we are so different from every other producers. Like most people, they sell the show and they sort of step back. We're like watching every version of it from storyboards all the way up to final. We helped write the theme song. We, do everything. So, but on the books, Brad and I go back and forth, and like it's always, if he can't connect, then I'm doing something wrong. So, which is good,
Yeah, absolutely. Chad?
Definitely seen Brad connecting with Mr. Rogers on the social media.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's
he
great about
seems to really
Brad.
have a good time with that.
Yeah, he's God, he is such a good publicity guy, good marketing person. It's funny, I as I started to work with him, I saw how amazing he is at that, getting himself out there and doing that. I realized that we missed that in comics so much. Like we had Stan who did it, Joe Quesada, who I actually just talked to today, was great at it, like great at sort of being that salesman that goes out and sells stuff. We don't have a lot of those people, and Brad is really, really good at it. Like I like to sit at home and be quiet and draw and do the work. I'm not as good as him at public speaking or promotions, but he is phenomenal. And so, yeah, so he'll dress up as Mr. Rogers, put the hair on. He'll dress up as Lucille Ball. He does it all. So
Now, for the three DC books that you've done, is that kind of the same approach that you took, or did you kind of have to take a different approach since they're, not real life characters? They're
um, I mean, look, I've known the characters, like I said, my whole life, so we kind of nailed them right in the beginning. The only difference really with the books was we tried to do them a little bit more comic-like, so there were more panels per page that we were sort of trying to teach kids how to read a comic with this. Like our goal with them was to sort of introduce kids who like our other books into comic books. So it's sort of like, the drug dealer giving away the free stuff, like the first one's free, but you got to come back for more. So we tried to get them hooked, but that's really bad for a kid's book to say that. Comparing kids' book to drugs. Great. Good job, Chris. See, that's why
you said you didn't know marketing.
Yeah, see? That's why Brad does all the talking on this stuff. But no, so it was pretty much the same approach. The only thing we made sure to do was to also highlight the creators of the characters, the people who are most identified with them. So we had them in the books as well. So, but it was sort of just the story of theirs was the story of what was so important about their story that made them somebody to admire. So, like Superman is admirable because he has all this power and yet chooses to do good with it, right? Or Wonder Woman is her superpower is love. Like she just cares for everybody. So Batman, it's just looking
just
out for
goddamn
people.
Batman.
Well, I hope
we didn't do that line.
You didn't do that line?
We did not do on the goddamn Batman or whatever he said.
I hope not.
No, we actually had a hard time. That one we had a hard time with with his origin story of all things. Because if you think about it, it's a pretty brutal origin story.
Right.
And so we were trying to figure out a way that we could do basically a double murder and not show it. And so there were I redid that page 5-6 times trying to make it work. I don't know if I was very successful, but how do you do it? You can't show a gun. You can't show anybody bleeding out. You can't show anybody getting killed. So we sort of just kind of danced around the fact that his parents were killed. But that's the joys of comic books versus kids books, right?
Right. Right. So I'm curious, looking at your style overall, I see some Peanuts and I see some Bill Watterson.
Yep.
And I'm just curious, what else is in that heady brew that you kind of take and have made your own?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely Peanuts. I grew up when I was a little kid tracing Peanuts. So my style really is like the big-headed kid with a little body, and I got stuck. And then, like I said, I was into Pogo. Calvin and Hobbes hit, and I was like, oh, you can actually make it more dynamic, and so that inspired me to kind of push the envelope that way as well. Pogo was a big thing. Bloom County was a big comic. I mean, it's been amazing my career so far. Last year, to show you how close I am, the Schultz Museum, the Charles Schultz Museum up in San Francisco or Santa Rosa, reached out because they noticed the TV show and said, obviously you've been inspired by Peanuts. We're doing an exhibit about influence, like people who are influenced by Schulz. And so they asked for a clip from the show, and then they asked for me to do an original drawing for them for the exhibit. And then they invited me out to come do a talk. So I went out there, and it was all the people that were influenced by Schulz. And there was my artwork sitting next to an original Peanuts, next to an original Calvin and Hobbes. And I was like, right, your head explodes because you're sitting there alongside your two biggest influences, which is amazing. But there have been so many, like John Byrne, like for a time. Sometimes there are things, if you look at the Superman book, there's a lot of John Byrne Superman in there, in a more cartoony version. Who else have I been? Like I look at my wall of shame. Like Dennis the Menace was a big thing. All the comic strips as a kid growing up, they were a big influence. Even Eric Larson. Eric and I have become really good friends, and every year he comes out and stays with me for New York Comic Con, and we sit and draw together. We did a 24-hour comic together.
Oh, cool.
One night, like idiots. But what's interesting is Eric is such a talented artist, and he could be a teacher if he wanted to, because he'll walk you through stuff. But his stuff is so cartoony, but realistic. Like he sort of walks that fine line.
Yeah,
like Byrne does.
And
so I've kind of adopted a lot of his stuff. Like a lot of the dynamic poses that I do, I'll always look at Dragon stuff or Spider-Man stuff that he did and sort of go, that's a cool pose. I got to steal that. And, even if it's some little kid dressed as, Albert Einstein jumping around, I still want to have that dynamic, and like, he just gives you little tidbits. Like, I just remember, like, I was like, what makes like a dynamic drawing? And his answer was just so simple. He's like, break the plane. And I'm like, what does that mean? So basically he's saying, like, if you see a figure punching and they're punching like this to the side, it looks very flat. But if you've got the hand coming off of that flat plane and you see that big giant foreshortening, it's instantly dynamic. And so I've started to incorporate that as well into my work. But there's like, he's so great explaining perspective. And if you go to his Facebook page or anything, he'll always have these things, these explainers why something doesn't work. And
yes, I actually do. I actually am friends with him on Facebook, and I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's just a good dude that interacts with his fans too, and calls bullshit on his fans. He wouldn't be Eric if he didn't do that.
Because he is a fan of comics as well as being in it. Like, and I think, like that's the big thing. He thinks of himself as a fan first and a creator second. So, that's why he used to get himself in trouble when he would call out other creators and say stuff, and everybody would be like, "Hey, man, what the hell's wrong with you?" And he's like, "Well, I'm just saying, as a fan, this is what I think." And they're like, "All right, whatever." But at least he's honest. Like, you don't ever, like, he was the one who said to me, like, you're never going to make it as a cartoonist. Like, he's like, don't even bother. And then I was like, oh man. And so like my career has always been built on people telling me what I can't do. So I was like, well, I'm going to show you. And when I got to work and he came back to me a few years ago, he was over and he goes, man, I was totally wrong, man. You are like really, really good. Like you showed me, which is great. Cause you want somebody in your life that is going to be totally honest and say, hey man, this sucks, do better. And when you do better, he says, that's really good. And it's not a lie. He's not blowing smoke up your butt. Like he's, truthful about it. So that's always good to have a friend who's also
always want that one friend. Maybe not a bunch of those friends. Like that could eventually wear your ego down, but
yeah, it could. But yeah, somebody, I mean, my agent's like that too. Like she is very, like she'll tell me, like I'll send her a manuscript and she'll be like, nope. And you're like, oh. And then like when you send her something she's like, this is really, really good. But it's good because she's not saying it for any other reason except that's what she feels. So yeah, it's always good to have somebody like that in your life, especially in the creative field.
Definitely. So on top of I Am Jesse Owens and I Am Stephen Hawking coming up soon, you've also got something, I believe it's called Imaginauts?
The Imagine Noodles.
Imagine Noodles, excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah, what can you tell us about that?
So I've been doing some of my own books besides Brad on the side. This will be my 4th fully done book on my own. There was The Yawns Are Coming. The follow-up was The Giggles Are Coming. Then I did A Little Emotional. And then this one's basically it's the story of a hyperactive chipmunk, a shy, unimaginative hedgehog, and a lizard that thinks it's a dragon. And so Chester, the chipmunk, has this great imagination. He's trying to bring his friend Henry, the hedgehog, out and to be more imaginative and play imaginary things, and he can't do it Chester finally teaches him how to have a good imagination. And so it's good. It's fun. If you like, it started because my son desperately wanted a hedgehog when he was little, and we had gotten him one. And so I wanted to do a book about a hedgehog. So I did this, and then sadly the hedgehog passed away in the middle of production. So the book is dedicated to his hedgehog, as it should be.
Very nice.
So,
my college roommate had one in our room.
Did he keep you up all night?
Sleep a lot.
Well, they sleep all day
at night.
All night.
Yeah, except at night.
My son was a night owl himself, so the two of them would keep each other company. Like he'd be up all night long with this hedgehog losing its mind. So he needed the company at night, and he had it.
Worked out perfectly.
Yeah. So
Chad?
So, I mean, I know you're doing your own creator stuff. Do you have any ideas of return, do you want to return to, comics with DC or Marvel or anything like that?
I've sort of had offers, or we want to do something. To be honest with you, I've reached a point where I no longer want to do work for hire.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the other side of the world. It's a whole different world when you own your property. Like, look, Brad and I own the Ordinary People Change the World books. So anything that's done with them, we make money off of it. If the TV show, it's ours. Like we get to make the choices on it. The stuff I've created over at Marvel, they could literally take the Franklin stories, turn it into a TV show, and I would make no money off of it. So I've sort of decided that I'm not going to be doing any work for hire anymore. Some people, look, that's how they make their living, and they should keep working. I have another avenue. So, I mean, I've been asked to do covers here and there and little things like that, which I'll do. Like I did, they had a Franklin Richards versus the X-Men or something, or FF versus the X-Men. And Tom Brevoort asked me to do a bunch of covers for them. So I did that. It's fun to kind of dip your toe in once in a while. But yeah, I don't know if I'll go back and hit it up anymore. But we'll see. Look, I never say never. I mean, I wrote a Marvel series for IDW a while back. They wanted to do a bunch of origin stories. But the promise was they were going to do a bunch of origin stories and then collect them in a book. Like, remember that old, Origins of the Marvel Universe or whatever it was called?
Origins and Son of Origins.
Right. And so I was like, oh, cool. We'll do an updated version and my name will be on it. And we got, I think, 4 issues in, and Marvel pulled the contract from IDW and the series died. So I got nothing out of it. So, and that's the other thing with this kind of stuff, with work for hire, you have no control if they decide to say, we're not going to publish or we're not going to do anything with this. And so, it was good while it lasted. It was fun. I mean, I loved the Pet Avengers. I loved the Franklin stuff. So
yeah. Well, I mean, if nothing else, the connections and relationships that you made, I mean, definitely worth their weight.
Oh yeah, well, look, I for a time there, I was like the Kevin Bacon of comics. Like I was working with everybody. Like you were just 6 degrees of Chris with everybody in the industry. Like I knew everybody. I've worked with just about everybody. Lately, because I'm not directly working on the lettering stuff, I don't have as many connections. Like a lot of the people that I worked with have sort of exodus like out of mainstream as well. Like I mean, the Bryans, the Ed Brubakers, the Brian Hitches, they're all sort of working out and doing their own creator-owned materials these days. So I don't have a lot of connections with the newer writers and artists that are coming up these days. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I just had a chat. Joe Casana called today about something. We were just joking about the old days. Now we get to call them the old days.
It's wild to think that it's been over 20 years since he took the reins.
Well, what's funny was that we were talking about all that stuff, and I had mentioned, I first met Joe when he was a colorist at Valiant. That's how long ago we met.
That's 30. That's a 30 plus years ago.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Yeah,
and I remember I went up to Valiant to get some freelance work. Met Jim Shooter, and then they showed me, and the way the office was set up, it was just 2 big long tables, and everybody was just sitting at those tables. It was like no cubicles or little offices. It was literally just long. It was almost like a family dining. Everybody was just there. And I met a bunch of them, and I met Joe, and then when I was up at Marvel, Joe had sent some samples to Don Daly, covered drawings, and I was in his office, and if you remember, Joe's style in early days was very much Mignola inspired look to it, like tiny little feet and the and I'm like, he's really, really good. You should give him work. Yeah. And Don started giving him work. So some of the first Marvel work was because some stupid guy like me walked into Don Daly's office and said, "That's good. You should hire this guy." And then we hung out for it was weird. It was just our careers were always intermeshed. I worked on Ash with him when they did that with Jimmy Palmiotti, and then when he came up at Marvel. So we've known each other way too long. So we're the old men of the group now.
The old men of the group.
Yeah.
With such wisdom.
Well, I don't know about that. But.
So what's coming up on the horizon? Anything that you can discuss with us yet?
What am I doing? Well, I can tell you that after Stephen Hawking is going to be Sally Ride. So that'll be the next book. So we're going to go into space again. We've started the second season of Xavier Riddle is on the go. What's interesting about TV is like these books. So in my book, I'm working on a book right now that won't be out until next summer. Mm-hmm. So it's like comics. I would letter a book and 3 weeks later it was on the stands. Books, it's like a whole year. We're almost done with our full second season of Xavier, but it won't even be out for another year and a half, like the final episode. They stagger them out throughout the year. We're doing that. I'm doing some work on Cowboy. I made a deal with Nate. We got the rights back from Boom back in the day, and now that we own it again, because there was some deal with the contract where they could have the rights to sell it and do whatever they wanted, and we finally got the rights back. Yeah, it was a weird contract.
That does sound unusual.
It was a boilerplate contract that we didn't really look at. We were supposed to have a lawyer look at it. We didn't. And so when they sold it or optioned it to DreamWorks, we initially didn't get a say in the deal. They got producer credit. We got nothing. We got basically small created by if it got made. We got a little bit of money, nothing great. So we found out with the contract that any new material we made, they could use in the option. So DreamWorks could take anything we wrote and pull it into whatever they were doing. So we're if we're going to be writing for a movie or TV show, we should get paid for it, not doing it. So we stopped production and we stopped working on the book.
Well, not to mention how much power that leverages to the other half of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah. They had the right to, so Boom had the right to make the deal. We didn't have a say in the deal. Like, so they could just say, we like that amount of money, or we're going to go with them. We didn't get a say. They got producer credit, which meant more money.
Right.
So we were like, we're not doing this. So we finally got the rights back. So I made Nate a promise. He wrote up a script. I give him a page a week. So in between all my other work, I do a page a week. So hopefully in another 50 weeks, so another year, I'll have the book done. So we'll have that out at some point. I don't know how we might just do it as a Kickstarter or something like that. And
right.
And then I'm working on some new books. I can't even talk about them because they haven't even gone anywhere yet, but I'm doing, some more children's books. I'm looking to do a graphic novel, another one. So, which I did a couple years ago for Penguin Random House. So I'm going to look to do another one. So
good on you.
Just busy.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't sound like you're hurting for work or anything.
No, and then again, I've got a company that I have 6 people working for me that letter all of Marvel's books. So
yeah, okay.
We've got all that going on. So busy.
Busy.
Yeah.
Chat.
So besides doing your own thing instead of working for the company, what is something else you would tell your younger self that now that you didn't know back then?
Well, I think the biggest problem I had was, number one, I chased the money. When I got into Marvel, I really wanted to get into cartooning, and that was the dream. And then they handed me all this lettering stuff, and I was making so much money that I was chasing the money and not the career. And I let the drawing stop. I stopped drawing. I was constantly working on lettering. And I think about all those years I could have had back if I was just working on drawing. And if I was drawing, I would have probably gotten, more stuff earlier. So I would say, sometimes you have to work for your career, but I would tell myself, just draw every day, keep getting better, do something. When I did a comic strip online. I did my own web comic, and for like 3 years, and I had to have a strip out 5 days a week. In my head, I was like, I have to do this. And you get so much better by working every single day. And even if you're not getting paid, you get better. And somebody like Brad notices your work and says, hey, let's do something together. So I would have done that sooner. So other than that, find a spouse that helps you out and does all the stuff that you don't want to do, like finances. And I screw up the checkbook every time I write a check. The checkbook is messed up for a month, so I'm not allowed to write checks anymore. So, but she's amazing with all that stuff.
You still write checks?
Well, you know what I mean. Anytime I do expenditures or whatever it is. So, but I've been very lucky. My career has been great. I've worked with great people. I have no complaints. If I didn't wait this long, maybe I would have never gotten the Ordinary People books. I wouldn't have gotten a TV show. So it all worked out in the end.
Yeah. And I don't think there's a whole lot of creators in comics anyway that can claim to have the diverse portfolio that you do.
Yeah.
And
that's the other thing too,
right? I mean, like you said, it's not about chasing the money. It's about chasing your passions.
Yeah.
And you're clearly succeeding at that.
Well, I appreciate it. But yeah, that's the thing is, I learned early, the more things you know and things you can do, the more guarantee you have that you'll have work. So like I was lettering, but I also learned how to color. I learned to write. I learned to draw. I learned production work. I learned how to put a book together. I learned how to create fonts. I was doing all these things that now when people were coming to me, I could provide everything. Like, you come to me, I will letter a book, I will design a book, I'll put in, like, we package the books for Marvel. We do the production work, we do the recaps, the next issue pages. We put it together as a PDF. We send it to the printer. If I wasn't able to do all that stuff initially, they would have never come to me to do it. And so it guarantees a certain amount of work. The more you know, the more necessary you become to the process. So,
right.
So kids, that's your latest tip from the old man.
Lesson. That's the lesson.
God, do I sound like an old man?
It happens.
It does.
Somewhere on the other side of 40, it starts happening more frequently. I found.
I know the hairline goes, and then so does
the hairline.
In my
goes.
day, we never used to. When you start saying those things, in my day,
Chad, I think we have time for one last question. If you want to close us out.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. Any conventions on your docket for the year?
No. So with the books, I do a lot of touring.
Mm-hmm.
Brad and I were on tour I was on tour for all of January. I was not home for a month. I traveled all around the country. It was amazing. But now I do like book fairs and school visits and stuff like that. I don't have a lot of time for conventions. The only one I've been going to, unless it's a cool offer, like if you want to invite me to Greece or to London or Toronto, I'll go. But nobody really invites me these days because I'm so far removed. The only one I really go to is the New York Comic Con, just because Eric comes in. It becomes like a little get together for the two of us. We drive down to the city together. We have a table together. So we just chat like the old days.
That's awesome.
So I will be at All Yeah Comics is it Harrisburg, New York? All Yeah Comics on Free Comic Book Day. So if you want to come out to their store, I'll be there all day.
I think you're one of the local artists from here up in Albany is going to be there too. Nicole Jelnick.
Okay.
Very awesome.
Again, more people I don't know, but okay, I'll know her by the time I meet her. It'll be fun. Like those guys, Mark over there at All Yeah is great. He's a good friend, and Art and Franco's going to be there, I know. But they're good guys. If you ever need to buy a book and you don't go to your local shop, give them a holler. They're really good. So I'll be there. So I'll be drawing pictures for free and signing books, anything. God knows, every time I do one of these things, there's always a person that shows up with like 400 books. Like I was on tour. I was on a book tour in January. I was down in Florida. I was at Books and Books in Miami, and this guy showed up with a suitcase, and he let everybody go first, and then he hauled out like 200 and something Ultimate Comics for me to sign. So,
oh no,
Brad laughed at me. He sat down and had dinner with his family. They had dessert, and I still wasn't done. So, but it happens.
Crazy.
You know what it is? I don't do a lot of conventions, and a lot of people are completists, and they want to get everybody who worked on a book to sign the book. Like a big one years ago was the death of Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody wanted me to sign the book because everybody was signing the book. So people want that full thing of everybody signed. So when they find out I'm out somewhere, they show up with like a ton of books. And so I had one guy at a Seattle at the Emerald City Comic Con, 400 hardcover books. He made multiple trips out to his car with a dolly and would come back and forth, drop them, go back. It was a day.
I can only imagine.
But it's fun. I don't mind. Look, if you want my stupid scribble on your book, you are more than welcome. So everybody out there, come to Free Comic Book Day. I'll sign every 5,000 comics that you bring.
Well, if I see you at New York Comic Con, I'll bring you back. I think it was Twix that you were asking for last time, right?
Wait, say that again?
Yeah, when last year you were asking for people to bring you Twix as
my God,
to your table.
So I was making a joke. Here's the thing. So I know I'm going to go now. We're going to be going forever because this is a tangent. When I go on book tour, I had a new publicist, and you might not get this because you're a little young, but she asked me, what do you need on tour? Like, so when you go, like you say, well, I need a board, I need a pen, I need a bottle of water, whatever. And I made a joke where I said, I want M&Ms, but no brown ones. Now, I don't know if you know the reference. Years ago, Van Halen on their rider for their tours would say no brown M&Ms. Everybody thought they were being elitist, but what they were doing was proving that they were reading the contract, so their safety with all the pyrotechnics. They were reading the contract thoroughly, and they were being safe. She didn't get the joke, and so I went on tour, and everybody was like, "Here's your water. Here are your M&Ms," and I had forgotten. I was like, "What's M&Ms?" Got home from that tour. I said, "Look, I was making a joke about the M&Ms. Please, no more M&Ms, because we all know if I was going to ask for candy, it'd be a Twix bar." 4, 5, 6 months goes by. I go to another tour. Here's your water. Here's your Twix bar. And I'm like, what? So right at the New York Comic Con, I was right in the middle of that one. So I was just like, make sure you bring a Twix bar. It was like just an inside joke for me and nobody else. And then people bought Twix bars. So at least me and Eric got some candy while we were sitting there. So
that's great.
Bring me candy whenever you meet me. That's
Twix it is. So where can you be found on online or on social media?
I pretty much camped my name, Chris Eliopoulos, on every bit of social media. So whatever it is, Blue Sky is that one, and Threads and X and Instagram and Facebook. It's all Chris Eliopoulos. Any of those that you look for, I'm usually there.
Okay.
I'm usually posting. A lot of times I'll just post like watercolors that I do, little drawings that I do. And so it's a fun little, I try to keep it light, no politics, no complaining, no, try to keep it upbeat. God knows we get enough of it on all social media.
Right.
Have a little spot where you don't have to worry about that.
That's cool. Yep. Good on you.
Yep.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. I appreciate your time.
Thanks.
You're welcome back anytime.
I'll be here next week.
Hey, actually, Chad, can we confidently announce who we have next week yet?
Ooh, who's next week?
It's AWA Red Room. I forget her name. And my computer died. So.
Oh well, not who I was expecting, but okay.
Well.
We were talking about a particular artist earlier this week, whose name was Flerick Blobbertson.
Oh no, that he
didn't happen. Okay, well,
didn't happen.
I was hopeful. He's such a cool cat. All right, well, that's our show for the week. Our guest has been Chris Eliopoulos, and we will be back next week with more fun and games as we dive into AWA's Red Room. I'm Matt, he's Chad, and we're the Comic Watchers, and this is our show. Check us out on social media, comic-watch.com, on X, Facebook, YouTube, all that good stuff. Blue Sky. Almost forgot it.
There you go.
Until next time, support local comic stores and read something cool. Thank you and good night.